Just went 6 to midnight over here, boys, because we get to talk to my guy, Nick Underhill, at Nick_Underhill here on OTBOT. Of course, Nick, New Orleans.football. Sign up now. Okay, you support Nick directly, but more importantly, if you're a Saints fan, you get the best Saints information out there. Nick, what's up, man? Welcome in.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Doing well. How are you doing, Nick? It's been a crazy offseason, dude. A ton of news that is just constantly breaking day by day. We're here. The Saints are under the cap. They managed to make it by the date. I want to start here, though. The latest news, Sheldon Rankins leaving, going to sign with the New York Jets. And I'm going to ask you a very sports talky question here, but I think it's an interesting conversation. Was Sheldon Rankins, when it's all said and done, was he a successful first-round pick for the New Orleans Saints?
That's hard to quantify. And look, I mean, he had a deformity that caused his Achilles to stretch, and the one tore naturally. The other one was preventative. I think it's called like Hagelin syndrome, I believe is the technical term. And that was his second Achilles injury. So, it's tough. His body defied him a little bit. I would say that, if you don't get a second contract as a first-round pick, I think that's probably a little bit of a disappointment. And, I'm not even sure really that was something that they considered. It seemed like they made the decision by signing Onyemata. And then last year in passing situations, they moved to more three-man fronts, and that kind of just squeezed Sheldon out of that role. And you go through and you look at the stuff that Onyemata did at the nose over the last 10 years. He had more sacks there over the last 10 years from the nose position, except for one guy. So, I mean, he had like the second best season of the last decade is a nose tackle pass rusher, and that allowed them to open things up, get Demario Davis going. You can blitz your safeties a little bit more. You can disguise, bring your pressures, be a little bit more exotic. And, before Sheldon was even gone, it seemed like they were moving away from him. So, I think at his peak, if he, if those Achilles are healthy, this is going to be the second year removed from the second surgery. So I think he has a better chance of getting back to where he was. And I think that player still is in there, but, for this team, they got their money situation. They have another guy that's doing really well. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to get competitive, but, he was from a media perspective, one of the best guys I've ever covered.
He's awesome.
Incredibly intelligent, patient, explains things, makes you smarter, loves the game. We got all the cliches here, but really he was one of the great guys. And I think those same traits really helped them. Like even when he wasn't getting sacked, his teammates would talk about like how he would be dissecting things that the offense was doing, calling out plays. And, they called him the quote unquote mastermind of the defensive line. And, I think they're going to miss that a little bit, but the on field, I think Onyemata is a good replacement. And, it pains me to say it, but yeah, I mean, he probably didn't live up to the expectation of the number 12 pick in the draft. I mean, if we're just being real, I think it just is what it is. And his body defied him, and he can't control that, but that's still the truth.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement. It's not necessarily his fault. It just injuries ended up defining it. But yeah, it's just it's the nature of the beast a bit there. So when you look at this defensive line now, Nick, and this has been a very good group. I mean, NFL record holders, obviously in the 100-yard rusher stat, but now you got no Malcolm Brown, no Sheldon Rankins, no Trey Hendrickson. How are you feeling about this D-line entering next year? Some of these, some of these key members start to move on.
I think it's a little bit sketchy. I mean, and even with these guys coming back, I think I would still feel the same way. I'll respect to Trey Hendrickson, but if he ever gets double-digit sacks again, I'll be extremely surprised. I think moving forward, he's probably more like a six-sack guy, like a little bit of Paul Kruger, maybe better than Paul Kruger. But Kruger had those highs, and then he just kind of settled back in, and he just was what he was. Cam Jordan's season last season, I think if you told me that he bounces back, I would feel a lot better about this group. Marcus Davenport hasn't performed the way he needs to perform. I think he's bubbling on that realm of disappointment, and we see the moments, the talent's there when everything clicks for him. It's good and it's exciting. Even you see him do things that make you start projecting. And I've gotten fooled by him more than once. But like we're at the point now where you got to go out and you need to get your 10 sacks or whatever. And it's just hard to see that path for him. So that group as a whole, I think is a little bit. It's probably the trouble spot on the roster right now. I mean, projecting Carl Granderson, I think, is pretty dangerous, even though, he had moments, but like, what can you really expect there? And, Malcolm Brown's a loss too. I think they do a good job of locating defensive tackles, coaching them up, putting them in a position to succeed. Kyler Davison did a good job there. And I think there's other candidates even on the roster, Malcolm Roach. They've just had a lot of guys over the last few years that have been good at that. But, he's probably, I don't know if you want to say an elite run stopper, but he's probably a higher end one down defensive tackle. And they're going to miss him too. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot to do there. If they could get, just one more guy, one more sure thing, I think it would help a lot. But I think that's probably where the most questions exist on this team right now.
Hey, Nick, T-Bob did mention Saints under the cap now. So I'll ask you this. Now that the moves have been made, where your expectations were, did they do more than they had to as far as taking hits on the roster? Do you feel okay about it? Or was it like, man, I didn't know they'd have to lose this much off the roster to get under the cap?
Yeah, I think they did probably what I expected. I would say maybe one or two extra moves, because I think we projected, when we would talk about it, it'd be like, extend Ramczyk, extend Lattimore. And like, they didn't do those things,
Right.
they waited and those didn't happen. So those required extra moves. And then, tagging Marcus Williams, there's another $11 million. Yeah, I mean, I think that they're right kind of where I expected them to be. Once it's done and you see all the holes, maybe it feels like there's a little bit more work to do than when you're talking about it through like an abstract lens. Cornerback's a big deal. I've heard TJ Carey's name out there, so that could be a possibility for them. He played for the Colts last year, was solid. He's 30. He's been up and down throughout his career. So we'll see how they fill in some of these holes. But yeah, I think that they need to get another cornerback, probably, maybe even a little bit higher end than that. Like, if you could draft somebody, that'd be great. A pass rusher. And then if they get a tight end of some sort, in an answer at defensive tackle, I think I would feel a lot better about them going into next year. I think that kind of put me back around, the 10-win projection that I've kind of held tight to. But I think losing Janoris Jenkins was kind of like the point where I was like, all right, 10 wins might be a little bit tougher than I thought. So we'll see how the rest of it comes together. But, I don't think the path to being that team is super far away. Like, these cornerbacks really the only, huge hole to me. And if you fill that, I think the rest of the stuff can kind of be pieced together with cheaper guys, draft options, and they can get there. But, yeah, I mean, there's definitely the cumulative of the whole thing is a little bit bigger than the individual pieces. But it is a lot. And, we've talked every week about the middle class. You have to keep that up because somebody's going to get hurt. And, who's going to step in? Who are your backup linebackers right now? In the past, at least there was, Craig Robertson, and the floor now is even lower than that. So, they got to find a way to just bolster some of those areas. So if somebody does get hurt and they are going to get hurt, everything doesn't fall apart because there's nobody else to fill in.
So they're under the cap. Obviously, the draft is coming up. These picks probably going to have a little – I'll ask you, do these picks have extra value this year, given that you need to fill out the middle of that roster some more?
It's a good question. I don't know. I mean, you can make the argument that the picks are valued a little bit differently than in other years because there isn't much of an off season. The regular season was weird. Scouting is going to be compromised. You don't have, the neutral field at the combine to build out your prototypes. Jeff Ireland, he drafts everybody off of prototypes. And, they have that historically going all the way back. And this is a team that values the combine. They aren't one of the teams that are underwear Olympics, blah, blah, blah. They highly value the combine. And it's going to be tough to prototype. Your measurements even, you guys played, you run your 40 at LSU.
The school.
And all of a sudden.
Yeah, they're a little more friendly. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. They're a little more friendly for sure.
You're a 5'1" guy, and all of a sudden LSU's telling people you're running a 4'6". It's hard to know what's actually true. And, surfaces are faster in different places. So, I think it's going to be a little bit tougher for them to do their studies and kind of, know exactly where people slot in. But, for them, though, those draft picks are important. They're going to be able to expand their draft class. It'll probably cost them $2.5-3 million because you sign somebody and it replaces a more expensive guy on the roster, the top 53. So you start knocking them off. So those guys definitely do have a ton of value, and I think it's incredibly important for them to have a good draft. And as good as Ireland's drafted, as good as the Saints have drafted, I think it's been a couple of years since they've kind of had that class where they're feeling really, really good about every pick. There've been a few over the last couple of years, McCoy, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, but I think they got to be better in the first round than they have been the last few years, and just really overall they just need to hit on a high number of those picks because this team is top heavy on talent, but that middle class, it's got to get reloaded one way or another.
Nick, do you foresee, because you've been so spot on this entire offseason, I feel like you were pretty humble in answering the cap question because, the only reason why I was able to wrap my head around all of it was because of your predictions and all the different avenues the Saints could go down. Do you see them making any more moves outside of the draft, this roster, before the season starts?
Yeah, I think that you're going to probably start seeing them, make a few moves. This is kind of, I don't want to say like the bottom feeder, but the opportunities here, I think are going to start opening up for them because the teams with money have spent their money, and now you got the broke teams that haven't been able to spend their money. And you got all these players that got squeezed out of their situations because these teams are broke. And, I think you're going to see guys that would normally sign, 3-year, $9 million deals start signing for a year and $1.5 million, $2 million because there's just nothing out there. And I think that's maybe where some of the opportunities to address that middle class, get some bargains, bolster things up, and set yourself up, to go into the draft will help them. But look, it's going to be backwards than how they want to operate usually. Usually they want to plug their holes, the big holes in free agency, and then, you go into the draft and you're kind of opened up. And, last year I think they were forced into a position where they had to get their interior offensive lineman early. And, maybe that was a little bit of a reach in some regards. I think Cesar Ruiz could still be good, but, if we're being honest, last year didn't, quite work out as they hoped. So I think maybe there might be a couple of those holes that they feel like they have to fill in the draft, which isn't great. But that's just kind of the situation they're in, and they're going to have to find a way to manage. But yeah, I think we're going to start seeing some movement here probably this week and next week. And it'll be guys probably, of the level of a TJ Carey or something like that.
Nick Underhill at Nick_Underhill. NewOrleans.football is the site. Nick, thank you so much for coming on every Tuesday, man.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Nick.
All right, Nick, take it easy, bro. Okay, we went along there. When we get back, close the show next with Ask the Bench, brought to you by delicious Mountain Blue Cold Coors Light.